They underestimated her. They laughed at the cleaning lady until one day, she changed everything. She had no power, no status, no voice. At least that's what they thought. But in the end, she held more power than any of them could have imagined. For 10 years, Maria cleaned this building. Every morning, she arrived before the executives. Every night, she stayed after they left. To them, she was invisible, just another part of the background. They never looked at her, never spoke to her, except maybe to tell her she missed a spot. She started noticing things. Papers left out. Conversations overheard. Passwords typed too quickly. It was just small things at first. Little details. But little details add up. At first, she ignored it. It wasn't her business. It wasn't her problem. Until she realized what they were doing. Fraud. Embezzlement. Insider trading. Millions moving in silence while the world outside had no idea. She could walk away. Keep pretending she saw nothing. That's what they expected her to do. Because what could a cleaning lady do against men in power? But Maria wasn't just a cleaning lady. Anonymous files. Evidence. Names. Dates. Transactions. It was all there. It landed in the right hands. And once it was out, there was no stopping it. They never saw it coming. The men who never noticed the woman cleaning their floors never realized she was the one who would bring them down. Power doesn't always come from the top. Sometimes it comes from the places you least expect. It started like any other morning. The city was still waking up, but inside the towering glass building, life had already begun. The soft hum of air conditioning, the flickering overhead lights, everything ran like a well-oiled machine. And right in the middle of it all was Aisha Carter. Aisha Carter wasn't just cleaning floors, she was cleaning up a system of corruption. She moved through the halls with quiet precision, a mop in her hands, a cart of supplies trailing behind her. She wasn't invisible, not to the people who really looked. But to the ones who mattered in this place? She was just another part of the background. A name on a schedule. A figure in the corner. She had been working here for years. Long enough to know every creak in the floors, every flickering bulb in the ceiling. Long enough to understand that power didn't always sit in the big offices upstairs. Sometimes it walked these very halls unseen. The other janitors liked her. She had a way of making people feel heard. "Morning, Aisha," murmured Luis, pouring coffee into a chipped mug. "Morning, Luis." Her voice was warm, steady. She exchanged a few words with Rosa, the elderly woman who worked the night shift, making sure she got home safely. Small things. Quiet things. Things that people in suits never noticed. But Aisha noticed everything. She pushed her cart past the executive elevator and stopped. The doors slid open. 2 men stepped out, deep in conversation. Aisha kept her eyes on her work, but her ears were trained on every word. "Audits next week. We need those numbers buried. If legal finds out, they won't. Just handle it." The men walked past without a second glance at the woman in the cleaning uniform. Aisha didn't react. She simply adjusted her grip on the mop and kept moving. The storage room was small, dimly lit. Aisha stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her fingers brushed against a shelf where she kept a few personal items, a small tin of mints, a folded note from her grandson, and a leather-bound notebook. She flipped it open. Pages filled with careful handwriting. Dates. Times. Names. She wasn't just cleaning up after these executives. She was collecting evidence. Upstairs, the executives laughed over morning lattes. They thought they owned the building, that their secrets were locked away behind high walls and expensive suits. But Aisha Carter knew better. She reached into her pocket, pulling out an old photograph. A younger version of herself, standing in front of a courthouse. A quiet victory. A battle she had fought and won. She wasn't done fighting. Appearances can be deceiving. And soon, they were about to learn just how wrong they had been about her. Power had a rhythm in this building. It moved in sharp suits, polished shoes, and the clipped conversations that echoed down glass-walled corridors. It smelled like leather, expensive cologne, and the ink of freshly signed contracts. And at the center of it all, Marcus Langford. Marcus Langford was everything they said about him. Tall, confident, a man who commanded attention the moment he entered a room. His handshake was firm, his voice steady, but his arrogance filled the air like an overpowering perfume. To him, people were assets. Numbers on a spreadsheet. Problems to be solved or discarded. The hallway buzzed with employees eager to be noticed, to exist in his world for just a moment. He passed a junior analyst. Barely a glance. The receptionist? A curt nod. And then Aisha Carter. He stopped, just for a second, as she wiped down a conference room table. His lips curled. Still here, huh? Must be nice to have such job security. A chuckle from his inner circle. Aisha didn't flinch. She didn't meet his eyes. Just kept scrubbing, as if he were nothing more than another stain to wipe away. Behind closed doors, it got worse. She's just a cleaning lady, one executive sneered, sipping an overpriced espresso. You'd think she owns the place, the way she lingers, another joked, shaking his head. Marcus didn't correct them. He laughed along. Because in his world, power meant never looking down. Never considering the people who made his empire run smoothly. He had no idea that he should have been watching Aisha Carter very, very closely. His office was a palace. Floor-to-ceiling windows, handcrafted furniture, a desk bigger than some people's apartments. Aisha's world was different. A supply closet barely big enough to hold her mop, and a small shelf of personal effects. The smell of lemon cleaner instead of aged whiskey. Two different worlds, divided by money, by power, by arrogance. But soon, those worlds would collide. And Marcus Langford would never see it coming. It was late. The building was quiet, except for the muffled voices seeping through the crack of the boardroom door. Aisha Carter had long since learned to move unnoticed. A silent observer in a world that refused to see her. She adjusted her cart, pressed her ear just slightly closer. If this leaks, we're finished. A hushed voice. Urgent. Nervous. Another voice, confident, steady. No one will find out. The numbers are buried deep. Aisha's hands tightened on the mop handle. They thought they were safe. They thought no one would hear. But they never paid attention to the woman who cleaned their floors, wiped their tables, emptied their trash. She listened, memorized, took a slow step back, heart pounding. This wasn't just about budget reports or office politics. This was bigger. The building was empty, but Aisha was still there. Cleaning as always. Watching as always. She moved methodically. Wiping down tables, straightening chairs, gathering discarded notes left behind in careless meetings. A memo, half crumpled in a trash bin. A USB drive left plugged into a forgotten laptop. Snippets of conversation echoing in the air vents, secrets floating between walls. She gathered it all. Meanwhile, Marcus Langford laughed in his penthouse office. She's just a cleaning lady, he told his board, swirling a glass of whiskey. What does she know? They laughed with him. Aisha wasn't laughing. She tucked a document into her pocket, wiped her hands on her uniform, and kept moving. She wasn't just cleaning anymore. Sometimes, the most unassuming can hold the keys to a revolution. She was collecting proof. Do you believe one voice can spark change? Comment below. The hum of an old vending machine filled the silence. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting long shadows across the worn-out table. The break room was empty, except for two figures sitting close, speaking in hushed tones. Aisha Carter and Daniel Reyes. Daniel had been working security for years. He saw everything, just like Aisha did. But unlike the executives upstairs, he actually paid attention. Aisha leaned in, voice low but steady. I've seen things no one else bothers to see. They all think I'm invisible. Daniel exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. That's exactly what makes this dangerous. Aisha reached into her pocket, unfolding a crumpled memo. She smoothed it out on the table. A string of numbers, circled in red. A transaction that shouldn't exist. Daniel scanned the page. His brows knitted together. This isn't right, he muttered. Aisha nodded. There's more. Conversations, documents, things I've found in the trash. They're covering something up. Daniel leaned back, eyes darting toward the door. You know what happens to people who ask too many questions in a place like this? Aisha held his gaze.
Yeah.
But someone has to. Silence stretched between them. Then, Daniel let out a slow breath. He tapped the table lightly, thinking. I can't do much, he finally said. But I can keep an eye out. I can get you into places you shouldn't be. Aisha nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. A noise in the hallway made them both freeze. Footsteps.
Slow.
Deliberate. Aisha quickly stuffed the memo back into her pocket. Daniel straightened, masking his concern with a yawn. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. The office was a different place at night.
Silent. Still.
The polished floors reflected the glow of the emergency exit lights. Aisha Carter moved like she always did, quietly, carefully. But tonight felt different. Her cart creaked as she pushed it down the corridor. She wasn't just here to clean. She had a mission now. As she entered the executive boardroom, something caught her eye, a folder, half hidden under a stack of files. Unlike the others, this one wasn't labeled. No corporate insignia. No neat title. She glanced at the door. Empty hallway. Her fingers hesitated for only a second before she picked it up. Pages filled with numbers, accounts that didn't add up. Funds transferred under fake vendor names. Meetings scheduled with no official records. A line item stood out. Asset liquidation. Undisclosed. Aisha swallowed hard. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was corruption.
Theft.
A cover-up so deep, it touched every corner of the company. Her breathing was steady, but her grip tightened around the folder. Her reflection stared back at her from the glossy surface of the CEO's framed portrait hanging on the wall. Marcus Langford. His smug, confident eyes looked down at her, as if daring her to act. She exhaled slowly. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. This was her moment. The truth was in her hands. But truth always comes at a cost. The office air had changed. Something unseen, but heavy, pressing down on every conversation, every glance exchanged in the hallways. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did you hear about the discrepancies in the accounts? The numbers don't add up. Langford's losing it. The boardroom, usually a fortress of polished confidence, was now a battlefield. Papers shuffled hastily, hushed conversations turned to heated arguments. A senior executive slammed a report on the table. We need to get ahead of this. If this leaks.
If.
Another interrupted. It's already unraveling. And at the head of the table, Marcus Langford. The man who once controlled every room he walked into now looked different, eyes darting, jaw clenched. He had built an empire on silence. Now, the silence was breaking. His voice, sharp as a blade. Find out who's talking. Handle it. Across the building, Aisha Carter sat alone in a supply closet. The same one she had taken breaks in for years. The same one where she had hidden away from moments of exhaustion, moments of frustration. She turned the folder over in her hands. The weight of it heavier than it looked. Flashbacks flickered through her mind. The time her paycheck had been miscalculated without explanation. The security guard fired for misconduct after speaking up about unfair treatment. The layoffs that had left janitors and clerks jobless while Langford and his circle took bonuses. She had been silent too long. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. When she opened them, the decision was made. Back in the boardroom, some executives had seen the evidence. Some were pretending they hadn't. One, a younger member of the team, held a copy of Aisha's documents in shaking hands. He met Langford's gaze. We need to address this. Langford smiled, but there was no warmth in it.
No.
We need to bury it. Aisha's voice, steady and certain. They thought I was nothing. Now I'm the voice they can't ignore. The air in the office was thick, almost suffocating. The tension before a storm. Outside the boardroom, executives moved like ghosts, whispering, pretending everything was fine. Aisha Carter knew better. She stood near a window looking down at the city below. So many people living their lives, unaware of the corruption towering above them, unaware of the truth she now held. She had spent years cleaning up their messes. But this time, she was cleaning up something bigger. Footsteps approached. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Intentional. A voice behind her. You know, they'll try to crush you for this.
She turned.
Standing there was the last person she expected, an executive, one of them. But there was something in his eyes. Something different. Disillusionment. He glanced around before stepping closer, voice low. Langford thinks he's untouchable. The others? They'll fold the second they realize he's dead weight. But someone needs to push first. Aisha studied him. And that someone is you? He exhaled sharply. I've sat in those meetings. I've signed those papers. I know what's buried. He paused, locking eyes with her. And so do you. Aisha let the silence stretch between them. Then, with a slow nod, she reached into her bag and pulled out the folder. The weight of it felt different now. Lighter. She slid it across the table. His fingers hesitated before picking it up. He flipped it open, scanning the pages. His expression hardened. It's time, Aisha said. To clean up this mess from the top down. He looked up at her, a slow realization dawning on his face. Then he nodded. Inside the boardroom, chairs shuffled. Voices murmured. The meeting was about to begin. Aisha straightened, shoulders squared. No more hiding. No more waiting. She stepped forward. The meeting has already begun. The board members sit at the long table, their faces stern, their gazes fixed on the evidence laid out before them. None of them expected the day to unfold this way. None of them knew that someone they had looked down on would become the very reason their empire would crumble.
Aisha.
The cleaning lady. She was always there, unseen, her mop and bucket moving quietly across the floor, a shadow in the background. They never thought twice about her. She was part of the office's scenery, an invisible figure, just another cog in the machine. But now, she stands at the center of it all. She's not alone. Behind her, a whistleblower executive, once a trusted ally of the CEO, is the one who brought this evidence to light. A man who has seen too much, who has suffered the consequences of the CEO's actions, and now he's ready to expose the truth. Aisha's hands tremble slightly, but she holds her ground. She knows what's at stake. She knows what she's risking. But she also knows this is the only chance for justice. The room is silent, save for the soft click of pens and the rustling of papers. The board members exchange nervous glances. One by one, they begin to look at the screen in front of them, where damning documents, emails, and images are displayed. Each piece of evidence reveals a dark secret. Hidden financial deals. Unreported transactions. A web of lies spun by the CEO and the executives who protected him. But it's the final piece, the one Aisha knows better than anyone. That is the most shocking. It's a photo. A photo of the CEO, standing in the office, his face twisted in a moment of rage, with Aisha in the background, completely unaware. But it's not just the CEO's expression that stands out. It's the timestamp. The moment that proves he was in the building during a time he's denied. A moment that ties him directly to the illegal activities he's been hiding for years. The room begins to buzz with whispers. The weight of the evidence is undeniable. One by one, the board members exchange glances. There's no denying it. They're looking at the truth, and it's too much to ignore. The CEO, sitting at the head of the table, can feel the pressure mounting. His face pales as the reality of the situation sets in. He slams his fist on the table, breaking the silence. His voice, shaky but loud, cuts through the room. This is a lie. It's all lies. I am being set up. His eyes flicker with panic, but he forces a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. You can't trust this woman. She's just a cleaner. She has no idea what she's talking about. You know me. I've built this company from the ground up.
I've made it what it is today.
This is an attack on everything I've worked for. But his words don't land. The room doesn't respond to his desperation. The board members remain silent, their eyes cold, their minds already made up. The CEO's face turns red with anger, his attempts to dismiss the charges becoming more frantic. "Enough," he yells. "I will not let this happen. Do you hear me?" But even as his voice echoes through the boardroom, the tide has already turned. The evidence is overwhelming. The truth is undeniable. It's then that the whistleblower executive stands. His voice is steady, yet laced with a quiet fury. "I've seen the way he operates. I've seen the lies. I've watched it all unfold, and I couldn't stay silent any longer. Aisha is telling the truth. I've been a part of this, and I can't ignore it anymore." Aisha's eyes meet his, and for the first time, she sees a glimmer of support. She's not alone. She never was. The board looks around, some still unsure, others nodding in agreement. Then, slowly, one by one, the votes are cast. Aisha stands tall, waiting for the verdict. And then, finally, the chairman's voice breaks through the air. "We have heard enough." The room falls silent. Every eye is on the chairman as he leans forward, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "We, the board, have reached a decision. The CEO is fired." A gasp echoes around the room. The CEO, his face a mixture of shock and rage, stands up abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor.
No.
"You can't do this," he shouts, his voice cracking with disbelief. "You're making a huge mistake." But it's too late. Security is already at the door. The CEO is escorted out of the boardroom, his protests falling on deaf ears. The board has spoken. Justice has been served. But as Aisha stands there, breathing heavily, the weight of the moment sinking in, there's something that lingers. Something she hasn't told anyone. Something she's been keeping to herself, hidden deep within her. What's her next move? And who else is involved? This isn't over. Not by a long shot. The echoes of the boardroom still linger, but the dust has settled. The company, once a place of silence and control, now moves with a new rhythm. The change is palpable. It's not just the busy sound of phones ringing or the soft tapping of keyboards. There's something different in the air. A subtle shift, as if the company itself is breathing in a new kind of life. New policies have been put in place. The CEO's corruption may have been exposed, but in the aftermath, the company has chosen to rebuild. The walls that once separated the executives from the rest of the employees are slowly coming down. And then there's Aisha. She's still here, but she's no longer invisible. Her role in the revolution is acknowledged, even if not everyone can fully understand the depth of her impact. The quiet, unnoticed figure who once mopped the floors is now a symbol of change, a symbol of courage. It's the little things. The quiet gratitude in the eyes of the employees as they pass her by. The respectful nods. They don't say much, but they don't have to. They know. They see her for what she truly is. A hero. A silent force that tore down the walls of corruption and brought light to the shadows. But it's not just the company that has changed. Aisha has changed too. There's a moment, quiet and private, where she stands in the corner of the break room. The whistleblower executive approaches her, his expression softer than before. They've shared a long, silent bond since that fateful day in the boardroom. But now he speaks, his voice low, filled with gratitude. "You did more than just expose the truth," he says. "You gave us all a chance to do what was right." Aisha nods, her expression thoughtful. It wasn't about fame or recognition for her. It was about doing what she knew had to be done. But hearing those words from him, it means something. In a world where power often silences the unheard, one act of courage can echo through every corridor. It's more than just a company that has changed. It's the way people see each other. It's the way they understand their own power. The change Aisha started isn't over. It's just beginning. And Aisha? She's only just begun to shape the future. What would you do if you had the power to make a change? Let us know in the comments below. Do you believe that one person, standing alone, can bring real change to a system built on power? Have you ever been underestimated? How did you turn the tables and prove your strength? What kind of change would you love to see in your workplace or community? And how can you be a part of it? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if you believe in the power of truth and resilience, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that will keep you motivated